Now that we know the role of Malassezia, what Malassezia is, and how shampooing can affect the condition of your scalp and hair, let's look at oxidative stress and its impact on hair development. Okay, so in relation to Malassezia, oxidative stress is categorized or defined as a cellular response to the yeast growth on the scalp. Remember, the last study talked about categorized subjects into low or high hair washing frequency. And they found that individuals with low hair washing frequency had a higher prevalence of scalp diseases and scalp conditions. So low hair washing frequency includes one time per week, washing the hair every 2 weeks, monthly, etc. When that is done, you're going to have an overgrowth of Malassezia yeast. That overgrowth of yeast now causes oxidative stress. And that oxidative stress is defined by tenderness, which is scalp sensitivity, redness and irritation, flaking, and itching. I want to stop for a minute and bring up tenderness. It is very common in Black spaces to believe that tenderness or scalp sensitivity is a common thing and should be accepted. That really means that yeast is breaking down the skin barrier because of your skin is infected due to its overgrowth, and you're losing the integrity of your skin. You should not experience scalp sensitivity as a common thing. That is a symptom of a scalp condition, which means that it should be inspected, treated, diagnosed by a doctor. It is not something to just accept and move on. The redness and irritation that will be felt, the flaking is not dry skin. I know a lot of times we'll wash our hair and then within 3 days, it's like, oh, it's flaking. And the first thing we go to is that we say, oh, it's just dry. See, my scalp is dry. My hair is dry. That's why it's flaking. That's not why it's flaking. Research studies have shown, it's shown that your skin cells are actually dying rapidly due to the fungal growth. And that is the shedding of the skin cells. The itch that you get is not common. It should not be considered normal. And that is also another symptom of fungal growth. And in that last study, it said that there was significant increase in oxidative stress within 72 hours after shampooing. So when you wash your hair once a week or less, you're going to get an overproduction of fungal growth, which is going to give you side effects such as scalp sensitivity, redness and irritation, flaking, and itch. And then if you prolong it, right, if it's allowed to go several weeks, that can now become a scalp pathology, which is dandruff, seborrheic dermatitis, atopic dermatitis, or psoriasis. As mentioned before in one of the previous slides, I talked about how sebum or oils are metabolized by Malassezia. Malassezia is a lipophilic fungus, oil-loving fungus, and it metabolizes these oils, butters, and sebum into what is known as oxidized free fatty acids. Okay, so this slide says sebum is metabolized immediately by Malassezia as soon as it reaches the scalp surface. If it is allowed to accumulate, significant growth of Malassezia will occur and signs and symptoms of oxidative stress will be observed. So what are these butters and oils that is food for Malassezia. Okay, as we said, Malassezia metabolizes oils and butters into oxidized free fatty acids, known as FFAs, or as I have listed in here, FFAs in my slides. So oil includes sebum, castor oil, jojoba oil, coconut oil, olive oil, corn oil, mineral oil, etc. Any oil that is a triglyceride or has triglycerides, Malassezia will metabolize. The butters and any other includes cocoa butter, shea butter, ghee butter, petrolatum, oleic acid, and more. Now let's look at a study that researched how hair oils may worsen seborrheic dermatitis in Black patients. It is very common for Black patients, African American individuals, and Nigerian women and girls, as a previous research study showed, to have seborrheic dermatitis. So this research was performed by and supported by the Department of Dermatology at the University of Alabama in Birmingham, Alabama, and Meharry College of Medicine in Nashville, Tennessee. Here's the reference for individuals who would like to take a look at the document on their own time. So, the study experiment. The objective was to assess the effect of corn oil, butter, olive oil, coconut oil, oleic acid, and castor oil on Malassezia yeast. The results was that when they did in vitro studies, they did not perform clinical studies, okay? So they did in vitro studies on this, which means that it is outside of the cell. So basically lab experiments showed significant Malassezia growth in all oils and butters that were mentioned on the previous slide. So the conclusion is that common hair oils such as olive oil and coconut oil on the scalp may propagate Malassezia growth, exacerbating SD, which is seborrheic dermatitis. So when you put these oils on your scalp and on your hair, does it make it feel good? Yeah, because it improves the mechanics of the hair, right? It feels like it softens the hair. It does what you want it to do aesthetically. It gives the hair shine. It makes the hair feel like it's much more manageable. But what it's doing while it's making your hair shine and have some manageability is that it's actually acting as food for Malassezia. And so if you leave it on the hair for long periods of time, you end up with a significant growth, a propagation of Malassezia on your scalp, which then gives you all of the detrimental effects that are associated with low washing frequency. Now, what they determined or what they suggested in this study is that although clinical studies were not performed, the application of oils to the distal hair shaft, not scalp, may provide benefits to the hair without exacerbating SD. Now, remember, they didn't do any clinical studies. And I can tell you from my personal experiences that I tried this out. I said, okay, I'm not going to put oil on my scalp. I'm going to put it on my skin. And I would do it as like a pre-poo because there's other studies that have shown that coconut oil penetrates the hair shaft deeper than any other oil that's out there because of its small molecular weight. And it acts as a barrier to protein loss during the shampooing cycle. So I was like, great, I'll use it as a pre-poo, right? I think a few times I'm using it as a pre-poo. I'm letting it sit on there for like 15 minutes. And then this one time, or a few times, I think, I let it sit for like an hour and a half because I just didn't feel like getting up after 15 minutes and washing my hair. So I just kind of just like lounged around and waited for about almost a little under 2 hours with coconut oil sitting on just on my hair. I'm not putting it on my scalp because the point is to put it on the hair to protect it. Well, within those 2 hours, I immediately started to feel an itch on my scalp. So the malassezia was like, well, thank you for feeding me. It immediately started to metabolize it, which didn't work. And I'm thinking, if I put this on my hair after I wash it, and I don't wash it again for another 72 hours, let's say, I'm going to have oxidative stress within those 72 hours. So this is pointless. I cannot put this on my hair. So kind of take this advice with a grain of salt, because they did not perform clinical studies that included applying oils to the distal hair shaft and monitoring oxidative stress on the scalp. So this is kind of like a suggestion with no supportive data. But what they did find was that the oils that they mentioned and the oils that were mentioned in the previous slide propagate or encourage the growth of malassezia yeast. So how is hair quality and hair growth affected by oxidative stress? Okay, so there's another study that looks at the role of oxidative damage in poor scalp health. And it looked at the ramifications to causality and associated hair growth. Now, on this diagram, there's like 4 stages. Did they show the 4 stages? Not really. Well, it's 3. Let's say 3 stages of hair growth. There's actually four stages, but anywho, the most common or well-known stages are the first 3, which is anagen, the active growth phase that lasts 2 to 6 years, the catagen phase, the transition, which is the transition phase for 1 to 2 weeks, and then the telogen phase, which is the resting phase for about 5 to 6 weeks, and it goes through the final stage where it returns to the anagen stage. That's like the recycling of itself. And this study was documented and published in the International Journal of Cosmetic Science, and it was supported by Procter & Gamble Company in Cincinnati, Ohio. So the study wanted to investigate whether oxidative stress plays a role in dandruff and seborrheic dermatitis. They wanted to determine if oxidative stress of the unhealthy scalp leads to compromised pre-emergent hair formation and poorly formed hair as it grows. So basically, if you have dandruff, dermatitis, or psoriasis, does that have an impact on the development of your hair when it's forming before it emerges from your scalp? And does it have an effect on the hair as it grows, continues to grow through all 3 stages, right? The third thing was that they wanted to determine whether the scalp condition affects the quality of the hair that grows from it. And the fourth was that determine if anti-dandruff shampoo, particularly anti-dandruff shampoo formulated with zinc pyrithione, could repair and protect the scalp and pre-emergent hair from oxidative stress, thus reducing oxidative stress on the scalp. So what's the difference between pre-emergent hair and post-emergent hair? Most people don't even think about this. It's kind of like hair is just hair, right? Well, hair not only goes through 4 different stages, they're categorized in 2 different groups. So pre-emergent hair is hair that originates deep in the skin, approximately 4 millimeters below or beneath the skin surface for 2 weeks before reaching the scalp surface. So this is hair you don't see. Okay, it has intimate contact with the surrounding scalp tissue while it matures and hardens. And then after it develops after 2 weeks, it migrates from the bulb to the scalp surface. So this is a hair, like I said, you cannot see with the visual eye. Once it emerges to the scalp surface, it is then defined as post-emergent hair that can be seen on the outer surface of the scalp with the visual eye. So in this area here, this would be the area, the first one would be where pre-emergent hair would develop. You would not see it. This is the bulb. This is the skin surface. And then once it emerges from the scalp, just this portion right here, maybe I can get a little highlight, just this portion right here, and this, and I'll draw this too, that is considered post-emergent hair. Everything else, where's my little pointer? Everything else down here is like pre-emergent hair. It has yet to emerge to the outer surface of the hair. Now, how does this affect pre-emergent hair? Or what causes oxidative stress? We know that oxidative stress defined by the symptoms, right? Redness, scalp tenderness, flaking, itching, and so forth. Well, when irritants are allowed to accumulate on the scalp, and this can come from environmental, like the pollution, your hair holds can hold a lot of irritants. So I don't care if you're driving to work with your windows cracked through a construction zone on the highway, everything that is in the air is being attached to your hair. Someone standing around you smoking a cigarette, or you go to a cookout or barbecue and somebody's out there barbecuing and making all this fantastic food, all that smoke is attaching itself to your hair. It's not avoiding it at all. So that is like your environment, the pollution. The next one is the next irritant is product buildup. That comes from everything you use and all of the raw materials or ingredients that are in those products. And then the third is the microbes. And as I mentioned before throughout this video so far, is that microbes are part of your normal microbiota. It's not even just your microbiota. Remember, your hands touch your hair. So when you touch the doorknob and then 5 minutes later you scratch your head, well, now whatever was on that doorknob is now in your hair. That's just the reality. Like, microbes are always around us. They live on us. We transfer them from one thing to the next, like they're transmitted all the time. So microbes are there. And so these irritants now can exacerbate or catalyze or create an environment where oxidative stress will occur. And that's why after like 3 days or something, you're going to start to experience some of these symptoms. Now, some people say, well, I don't experience anything. I haven't washed my hair in 2 months and it doesn't itch. It may have itched the first week, but it hasn't itched like that for 3 other months and I'm fine. That's fine. Everyone doesn't experience all of the symptoms, but just because you don't physically feel those symptoms doesn't mean they're not occurring, right? So you may not experience, let's say you experience itch. You've gone so long without washing your hair. You're like on the 3rd month, right? And you're protective styling. And by the 3rd day after the install, you're like, oh my gosh, my scalp is itching. And then after some time, it doesn't itch that much anymore. I guess your body has gotten used to the to the response, right? So it kind of stops itching, and then you keep your protective hairstyle for those 2 months or 3 months or 1 month. And then when you take it down, you see all this flaking. And you think like, well, that's just dry skin, or like, that's just product buildup, or that's not my skin. That's just product, that's just product buildup. That's not me. Well, that's another symptom. Or you go back to get your hair braided again, and there's a spot on your scalp that is so sensitive that you tell your hair braider or your hairstylist, hey, can you be careful in that area? Because when you braid that area, it's really tender. Well, that's your skin barrier breaking down. So all of these are symptoms of oxidative stress, and the redness you cannot see on your scalp unless you take a physical mirror, part your hair, and look at it. Now, someone else looking at your hair can see that your scalp is inflamed in certain areas, but you cannot see that. The most you will experience or observe are the other three, the tenderness, the flaking, and the itching, right? But all four are symptoms or signs of oxidative stress. And this oxidative stress happens because your innate defense system becomes unbalanced. When you have an infection on your body has an immune response. It's going to release certain immune responses to control or remove the antigen, which is the foreign object, the pathogen that's there. But if that pathogen is allowed to grow and thrive, your cells start to lose its function. It can no longer control the growth, the defense system that you naturally come with to combat pathogens. It becomes unbalanced, and then you start to experience all four of these symptoms of oxidative stress. Now, within this study, and I'm going to use another whole video to kind of go in depth of this study, but just to kind of glance over some of the things they looked at were some of the measurements and parameters. So they knew that sebum is oxidized by malassezia, and what they did was use an oxidized lipid as a biomarker, and this biomarker is known as HODE, H-O-D-E. It's hydroxyoctadecadienoic acid. Long word, don't worry about saying it. But they use this oxidized lipid as a biomarker. And then they collected scalp surface samples and hair samples to analyze by HPLC-MS over 16 weeks. Don't worry about HPLC-MS is high pressure liquid chromatography, mass spectrometry, and it's used to perform structure elucidation of products or of molecules. And so they use this type of instrumentation to assess the scalp surface, the scalp samples and hair samples. They also measured water loss through the subject's skin epidermal layer, and they measured the flaking severity of individuals who experience oxidative stress. They also wanted to assess whether anti-dandruff shampoo played a significant role in scalp health and the reduction of oxidative stress caused by malassezia. And so some of their test products included anti-dandruff shampoo versus cosmetic shampoo for the placebo. Now, the results was that oxidative stress is a response to dandruff. We know that from me explaining this in previous slides, right? It's a response to the irritants that accumulate on your scalp, and you experience the four symptoms of oxidative stress, right? So it is this type of stress is a response to dandruff. They also found that anti-dandruff shampoo is very effective at reducing oxidative stress. That includes flaking, histamine levels, interleukins, which are immune responses, and transepidermal water loss. So the body responses to an infection is reduced when the fungal count is lowered on the scalp or skin surface. Related studies in their conclusion was that it showed hair quality and texture and performance were affected by scalp diseases. So knowing that these scalp diseases the hair quality and texture were affected by scalp diseases, the anti-dandruff shampoo can reverse a lot of those problems or symptoms that are found with those who experience oxidative stress. So there are common hair characteristics associated with unhealthy scalp conditions using scanning electron microscopy and atomic force microscopy. These instruments look at I want to say like a 3D layer, gives you like a 3D depiction of a product. So if you ever seen if you search like a 3D image of hair, you'll see it. It's always like in a gray and white picture. That's kind of like a scanning electron microscopy image. Okay, so anywho, they looked at the common hair characteristics, right, that are associated with dandruff and psoriasis and seborrheic dermatitis and atopic dermatitis. They analyzed these hair strands with these following conditions, and they found the following: that hair produced with oxidative stress have thick and rough cuticle layers. They have smaller hair diameters versus the normal size diameter. So it's like what we think is fine hair. Now, some people have biologically, because of their genetics, they have fine hair, right? But the hair is not being produced under optimum or healthy skin cells. So as a result, as a side effect, the hair diameter is going to be smaller. They also found that the hair was more fragile and brittle, and that there was surface pitting. Now, surface pitting, from my understanding, is indentations in the cuticle layer, like holes. Okay? Imagine going into your backyard or into a field somewhere and just digging up a bunch of holes. Well, those little pits are like are distributed along the hair strand. They also found that this type of hair has no shine and it doesn't grow very fast. So it has a slow growth rate. And when I read that, I was thinking, that's all the complaining or complaints that a lot of people have with type 4 hair. They're like, well, my hair doesn't shine. My hair barely grows. My hair feels fragile and brittle. And I have high porosity hair and my hair is fine and it feels dry. All this stuff is associated with the scalp condition that an individual has. So I'm trying to compile all of this, right? So we get a full understanding. When the hair or scalp is not cleaned within 72 hours, whether or not you feel the symptoms, you experience symptoms, your skin is experiencing oxidative stress. And once your skin starts to experience oxidative stress, then your hair is still growing. It's not that your hair is going to just automatically stop growing because of fungal overgrowth. No, that's not really what happens. Your body is, especially when you're young and you have a high cell turnover rate, it's going to keep growing. The problem is that the quality of the hair growing out of your head is now affected by your scalp condition. So you can grow, let's say, for example, you decide, hey, I want to grow my hair out and I'm going to do this lace frontal for a whole year. Like I'm going to do my lace frontal. I'm going to get it done every month or every 2 months. And you keep that lace frontal for January and February. And then in March, you go back to your hairstylist and you do another one. And she braids your hair and then she puts the oil on and all of that. And it looks all good. And then you put the lace frontal back on and then it stays on for another month. Well, your hair is still growing out of that, right? And so you get to the end of the year and you're like, oh my gosh, I have so much hair. Look at all of this hair. Well, all of that hair was grown under oxidative stress. All of that hair was grown with a high fungal count on its scalp and in its hair follicle. So now that hair is going to have the quality of the hair is going to be compromised. It's going to have a rough and thick cuticle layer, most likely. It's going to have a smaller diameter. It's going to feel fragile and brittle. It's going to be highly porous. It's probably going to lack shine, and it probably feel like it take a long time for your hair to grow, because your skin condition is affected by the overgrowth of the fungus. So in here, I want to give here's a graph that shows the role of oxidative damage in poor scalp health. There are ramifications to causality and associated hair growth. And so here's a graph that shows post-emergent hair and pre-emergent hair. Pre-emergent hair, regardless of your scalp condition, whether it's healthy or not, whether it's diseased or disease-free, it doesn't matter. Pre-emergent hair cannot be fundamentally repaired with cosmetics. So if your hair lacks shine, if it's fragile, if it's brittle, the protein treatments, the conditioning agents, the edge control, the whatever product it is, because the pre-emergent hair cannot be fundamentally repaired, it is very difficult to, mend the hair or get the hair to basically do what you want it to do. It's not going to be very accepting of hair product out there because it has a lot of deformities. It's basically poorly formed hair. And that hair stays with you until you cut that hair off. Now, let's look at, let me see, do I have something here? Great. All right. Here in this graph shows the birth of your hair, right? And it starts to mature. Let's say in this section here, you do a protective hairstyle, and you do it for 2 months. Hair grows 1/2 inch a month. So that means in 2 months you have 1 inch of hair, right? So that 1 inch of hair that is produced under oxidative stress, that now has all of these, that's poorly formed hair caused by oxidative stress, as it continues to grow, it will stay right there in the hair strand. It's not going anywhere unless you cut it off. That is it. So that hair that lacks shine, the hair that's fragile and brittle, the hair that's highly porous, it will stay with the hair strand. You cannot use cosmetics to change the properties of this hair. The only way the properties of the hair growing out of your scalp are being produced within the hair follicle to change is for the scalp to be healthy and to be free or low with microbes. It needs to be clean and free of microbial growth. It's like normal microbiota is part of our body, right? I mean, it's going to live on us, but it doesn't mean that there has to be an overgrowth or overproduction of it. It has to be controlled. So if that hair is affected, it'll just stay within the hair strand. Now, what makes it very interesting is that, if you go through, let's say within a year, you experiment, washing your hair frequently for a couple of months, and then you say, well, I tried that, but I didn't really, it really didn't work for me, my schedule. And then you go back to wash your hair once a month, and then you keep flip-flopping and flipping, right? What happens is that you have all of these, you have multiple points in your hair that could have different levels of quality. So imagine you take a section of, let's say, like 6 inches of hair, and within 6 inches of hair, because you transition from high wash to low wash frequency, right? Now one section of hair has higher quality of hair than another section of hair that has a lower quality of hair. then another section that has another, maybe a higher quality, a lower quality of hair. And it keeps on going throughout the entire hair strand. Now, because of the change between the quality of hair from one point to the next point in the hair strand, you have what? You have weak spots in your hair. So those weak spots in the hair, remember, all this hair cannot be fundamentally repaired with cosmetics. So those spots in the hair strand, right, that change from low quality to high quality hair back to low quality hair because you've changed over a whole year of how often you're going to wash and care for your hair, how often, what kind of routine you're going to do. You have all these weak spots. And when you have weak spots in the hair, you have a higher risk for hair breakage. So this is kind of like why there's this debate or this mystery about how, can hair grow? There's this huge argument about, well, it's just genetic why hair grows like that, or, it all depends on your routine. And both are true and both are false. It can be true and false at the same time. Is hair growth and hair texture, do genetics play a role? Yes, they do. Do routines play a role? Yes, they do. But we have to look at what are we doing? What kind of accountability should we have when it comes to the quality of our hair? A lot of times, the way we take care of our hair is through cultural traditions. Our grandmother braided and greased our scalp, and so we feel like that's what we were supposed to do. Well, my grandmother did it when I was little, and my hair grew super long, so I'm just going to do that again. There's no scientific backing to any of the hair care practices that we're doing. We're kind of just going off of word of mouth and just winging it. And what I wanted to do was look at it from a scientific perspective. And when I did that, it makes a lot of sense as to why the hair looks as it does, why the quality of hair, the feel and touch of the hair, the performance of the hair exists as is. And why the hair is breaking. Why is there no retention? Why is it that everyone's hair is growing at the same rate? Asian, Caucasian, and African individuals are growing hair at the same rate. But it seemed like those with kinky, curly hair are not retaining the growth and have all of the traits of someone with oxidative stress. So I just want to put that out there, that pre-emergent hair cannot be fundamentally repaired with cosmetics, and it plays the quality of your pre-emergent hair that eventually becomes post-emergent hair will determine how you care for your hair, what products you try to use to fix or condition the hair. In conclusion, scalp health determines hair quality. The hair and scalp must be shampooed frequently to minimize oxidative damage, scalp diseases, I can't talk tonight, scalp diseases, and deformed hair. Remember that the hair quality can be affected, in which if your skin cells are battling an infection or fungal growth, it can end up, your pre-emergent hair can end up producing hair that has a thick and rough cuticle layer. It can produce fragile and brittle hair, hair with no shine, smaller hair diameter versus a normal size, indentations in the hair, and can grow at a slower rate than normal hair under normal scalp conditions. Here is a graph, and I'm going to get my pointer. Here's a graph that looks at or compares normal skin, right, to skin or scalp with SD, seborrheic dermatitis, and atopic dermatitis. In all of these graphs, there is a hair follicle that's here, that's producing a hair strand, and it's moving from the inner layer of the skin to the outer surface of the scalp, right? It's extending outside of the scalp. And then on this scalp, you have All of microbial diversity. That's what you see in these little like yellow clusters and like look like little green footsteps that are here, and purple circles that are here, and pink circles. This all represents microbial diversity. And this area here, where it looks like little orange dots, that's the sebum that's there. And that sebum is coming from this sebaceous gland that's making its journey up through along the hair follicle and depositing onto the scalp surface right here. Now, for normal skin, as I mentioned, we have normal microbiota. So we have germs that live on our skin and our hair and scalp as just part of its full life, right? But the thing is that it's controlled. And when you compare it to an individual with SD or atopic dermatitis, you start to find that the microbial growth starts to significantly increase. When irritants are accumulated on the scalp, as we talked about with like pollutants, hair products, and microbes, you get all of this irritation on your scalp. And that irritation on your scalp leads to pathogen colonization. Leads to pathogen colonization. Because the sebum that is here, that's traveling through the hair follicle, you notice that it's accumulating, right? Why is it accumulating? Because it's not being washed off. When it's not being washed off, Malassezia that's there can now metabolize this sebum and any other irritants that are being applied to the hair, and its colonization, it will produce multiple colonies. When there's an overgrowth of Malassezia, you have other microbes that's going to lower in count because microbial diversity is going down. As Malassezia is growing, you have these antigens and metabolites and pro-inflammatory cytokines that were once sitting outside the cell here, right? But now they're moving into this area. Why are they moving into this area? Because this area is now inflamed. The keratinocytes are proliferating, which means that your skin cells are growing rapidly because they're the ones that were around are dying off, and so that's triggering cell generation, right? So you're going to get this proliferation of keratinocytes to increase, and then you're also going to there's inflammation that's here versus here where in normal skin where you don't see inflammation along of the skin surface or the skin cells. You see inflammation here in this area. There's an inflamed immune response. And you also start to see more microbes move further and further and further down the hair follicle over into the sebaceous gland, right? Normal skin, they mostly stay on the surface of the skin. You may have some on the hair follicle, but there's not much. Microbial diversity, there's an increase of microbial diversity, but there's not an overgrowth of fungus that's growing on your skin. So you're not going to have an inflammatory response. Here, as sebum starts to grow on the skin or deposit on the surface and it's not being removed, you have an increase in Malassezia. You have a decrease in other microbes that are on your skin. And then you have inflammation of your skin. And you have this inflammatory response now that is trying to control the growth of that fungus. So it's responding to it. Now, what's the difference between SD and atopic dermatitis? The main difference is that you're going to get a disrupted skin barrier here. So dermatitis is kind of like the same thing where you get pathogen colonization, right, in both You get an inflammatory response in both, and you get microbial growth. Okay, so I already mentioned that. But the difference is that you get a disrupted skin barrier. So now that skin barrier that was intact over here, you start to experience tears in the layers of your skin. And when the skin barrier starts to break down, that may be scalp sensitivity or skin sensitivity or tenderness is a symptom of that. So that disrupted skin barrier is going to produce a response or symptom to oxidative stress here. Okay, so now that we looked at oxidative stress and its impact on hair development, let's look at some of our Black hair care practices and protective styling culture. There are several myths that are associated with Black hair or kinky hair, and I didn't start hearing them until I got to college. I mainly wore a relaxer from the age of 5 all the way to 18 because that was just a thing to do, you know. I guess it made my hair more manageable to my mom, so I maintained a relaxer, and I went to a hairstylist every 2 weeks like clockwork. If it wasn't on Friday night, it was on Saturday morning, and I wore that hairstyle for the 2 weeks until I went back. So I didn't hear many of these myths because I had a hairstylist that really took care of my hair from the age of 5 all the way to 18. And I remember all of my hairstylists that did my hair. So when I got to college, I heard I started hearing these hair myths, and I'm like, where does this even come from? This is new to me. So some of them are here, like dirt makes your hair grow. Greasing the scalp is healthy for the hair. You shouldn't comb type 4 hair. Let's see, protective styling is for type 4 hair because it's low manipulation. I hear women say it all the time, like you can't manipulate your hair because if you manipulate your hair, then it'll all break off, right? Another one, washing the hair will make our hair break off or it'll all fall out. You can't do that. We're not supposed to wash our hair, right? We need the good oils for the scalp. So that goes back to like greasing the scalp. I never greased my scalp, even when I was younger. I didn't know that was a thing to actually grease the scalp because I had a relaxer. You don't really put oil on your hair like that, and you just maintain that hairstyle until your hairstylist did it again. But I remember like some girls like oiling their scalp, and truthfully, if I'm being honest, all the girls that were oiling their scalp really didn't have any hair. So I didn't understand how that went hand in hand because it was like you're oiling, but it's not growing. So, I mean, you do what you want to do, but I remember hearing that, like, you know, you need the good oils for your scalp and all of that. The other one is that I've heard is that black hair is protein sensitive. I'm not sure where people are getting that. I haven't seen anything like that in science research. From my understanding, all hair is the same at the molecular level. The position of the hair follicle determines the curl pattern. So if your hair follicle sits straight up, right, and maybe I can probably draw it here. Your hair follicle sits straight up, then you get straight hair. If your hair follicle is kind of like this, now mind you, this is like your scalp surface. So if your hair follicle is straight, you get straight hair. If it's kind of bent to the side, you get wavy hair. And if it comes out like this, where it's flat, you get curly hair. So it all depends on the direction of the hair follicle that determines your curl type. So I'm not quite sure where people are getting Black hair is protein sensitive because all hair should be the same at the molecular level. It's just the position of the hair follicle that determines your curl pattern. Okay, so every hair can I would think that most hair would be able to be treated with protein. Now, if you're going to sit there and add protein after, do protein treatments repetitively, right? And you use a lot of hair products that is formulated with protein, maybe there's a buildup of protein on your hair strand and then it breaks off. But I haven't heard anything like that in the scientific community, that like hair specifically defined by race is sensitive to protein. Okay, so the last one that I've heard is that shampooing our hair will result in hydro fatigue. It's like they're trying to say that the hair is going to get tired of having water. Your body is mostly made with water. Your hair, as pre-emergent hair, was developed beneath the skin surface that has lots of water. I'm not understanding why the hair would be tired of water. I think what's happening is that all the things that I mentioned, as far as like the characters or the traits of low quality hair, because it's brittle, because it's fragile, it has a lot of indentations in the cuticle. It has a lot of cuticle breaks. I forgot to put that on the slide. It has a lot of cuticle breaks in the cuticle layer. The mechanics, as you start to comb and brush and maneuver low quality hair, it cannot withstand it. And so most likely it would end up breaking off as a result because it's poorly formed. And so what people probably think is that their hair naturally is tired of being combed and shampooed. Is just really poorly formed hair that cannot withstand the daily grooming practices because it's just too weak to do that. It wasn't developed under I want to say hygienic or optimal conditions. It wasn't developed under conditions with proper cell functioning. It was developed when the skin cells were infected or had experienced an overgrowth of yeast. So now you have all of these risks associated with the hair. And then when they try to go and like comb it and wash it, you get all this hair fall. So these black hair myths, if you actually breathe through them, like the dirt, greasing the scalp, using the oil, not washing, actually adds to all of the contributes to all the oxidative stress that was observed with low washing frequency, and it supports the data that was shown saying that African American individuals and Nigerian women and girls experience a higher prevalence of scalp conditions like dandruff, dermatitis, and psoriasis. So these hair myths, I think, are contributing to or what I've concluded is that these hair myths are the root cause for so many hair problems within the natural hair community. There's no scientific backing to a lot of this stuff. A lot of this stuff is just kind of like passed down through generation. A lot of it's just, I heard somebody say, and every single time I hear this, the person themselves never say they did it. They always say, well, I know somebody that knows somebody that they didn't wash their hair for 5 months and it grew 8 inches long. Like I always hear, it's always like through word of mouth of this happening. And yeah, because of social media, you see people, with the hair, the protective styles, and they take down their braids and are like, oh my gosh, look at all my hair. It's so long. And it's like, that's great. But then guess what? They're not really, if you notice, they're not really wearing it out. after that. Because when they try, all of that brittle or poorly formed hair that grew in that protective style cannot withstand the daily hair grooming practices, and you find them put it right back in that protective style. So these hair myths, we need to really evaluate these hair myths. To me, when I look at it and the scientific information that I have, I don't pay attention to them. But I think most of the natural hair community, or I want to say like anybody with kinky hair, I don't care if it's relaxed or not, pay attention to it because it's the only information that we have to go on. Here are two pictures showing the shape of the hair follicle. If you have straight hair, your hair follicle will most likely be in a vertical position where you see the hair come straight out of the follicle. If you have wavy hair, that hair follicle is slightly bent to the side. And if you have curly hair, let me get my pointer. If you have curly hair, then the hair follicle shape is more so flat. So this determines your curl pattern, whether you are straight, wavy, curly, or very coily, kinky hair. Has the same, each hair, no matter the hair follicle shape, has the same molecular structure. However, the curl pattern will be different based on the shape of the hair follicle. So my next question is, based on all the information that we have, are protective hairstyles just an incubator for microbial growth? Anybody who has worked in a lab or has done a lab experiment in school knows that in order to even grow microbes, you need agar, you need a plate, and you need some swabbing material. And so you fill that agar, let me get this here. You fill that agar with all of the nutrients, and you pour it onto a plate here, and then you take your spreader and you collect your microbes from a source, and you spread it onto this plate, and then you place it into an oven of proper conditions. And after some days, 2 days, 3 days, 5 days, depending on what you're growing, you will start to see colonies appear on the surface. Now, think about protective hairstyling, okay? Your scalp already produces the sebum. Your scalp is the agar plate. This is just like as an analogy. Your scalp is like the agar plate, right? Your sebum and the hair oils and butters are the agar, right? That's the medium that's going to produce microbial growth. And then because you have Malassezia as part of your normal microbiota, when the hair is not washed, or the hair so-called is protective, and I don't care what it is, I don't care if it's a lace frontal, if it's a silk press, if it's a box braid, it doesn't matter. The conditions on the scalp are now perfect for microbial growth. And it will, after a few days, you start to experience all of these symptoms of oxidative stress. You start to experience itching, redness, inflammation, and so forth. And then instead of actually cleansing the scalp and the hair, right? Because you're like, I can't deal with this itching. What do most of us do? We just kind of pat our head, or we find something that's pointy to get in there and to, scratch it. We do all kind of stuff. We ain't washing the hair. That's just like a no. It's like, well, I just washed my hair like 3 days ago. It's still clean. It's maybe itching, but it's still clean. Like that's a thought process that goes through our mind. And I'm confident saying this because research studies have shown that a lot of African American individuals have low hair washing frequency. We have a very low washing habit. So anyways, after your protective style and you take it down, you start to have this. on your hair. This you see this picture in the upper right corner. You have all of these flakes and they're on the top of your hair. You take it down. You're like, why is everything, it's all flaky. And you're just thinking like, oh, that's just product buildup. And the truth is that that's your skin. I mean, it's product buildup too, right? Because it hasn't been washed off. And if you've been adding product on top of product, yeah, it's going to cake after a while. But the flakes that you're seeing also include your skin cells that are rapidly growing and dying because it's trying to control, or it can no longer control, the fungal growth that's been happening on your head for like the last week or month or 2 months or so forth. All right. So that's just it's just a question. It's something to think about. If the way we take care of our hair, are we contributing to oxidative stress? Are we the cause for the texture and the quality of hair that's actually growing out of our head? It's not always genetic, and I'm kind of shocked that more people with kinky hair have not tried to experiment washing the hair daily to see what happens. I think a lot of us kind of just followed this process and said, well, this is what we're supposed to do because this is our hair and this is how we take care of it. And we just accepted it. And then I don't care if you're relaxed or not. It doesn't even matter. Like it's very common to not wash the hair daily for those with kinky hair, So that's one of the reasons why so many women go to what they can call protective styling. I'm not going to call it protective styling anymore because I don't see it like that. No research has shown that. But this is one of the reasons why people either go to protective styling or they go to relaxers, because they have to deal with several inches of hair that is poorly formed on their head. You're talking 10, 12 inches. I don't know if it goes to her shoulder or it goes to her bra strap or what have you. And she's battling, or he's battling, combing, conditioning, and styling several inches of poorly formed hair. So a lot of us have kind of accepted that our hair is just hard to do. And there's been a huge debate about, when a woman comes out and she says, hey, I'm going to relax, or I'm going to shave off my hair or whatever because I can't manage my hair. You have all of these young women who will come out and say, well, it's just all in your mind and you just can't manage your hair and you just have to be patient with your hair and you have to love your hair. But is what she's saying, is it true that she's having a hard time managing her hair? I think that woman would be telling the truth. Why is that? Because based on scientific studies, if she hasn't been washing that hair often, the scalp condition is unhealthy. And as a result, the hair is being poorly formed, and she's done everything she thought she was supposed to do to grow several inches of hair. Now she's dealing with several inches of poorly formed hair, and it is just a battle to work with. So, mouthful, but it's just something to think about. Do we really know the texture of our hair? Is it what we say it is, or can it be something else? Because what it looks like to me, from what I see, based on scientific studies, is that our hair are the problems, the complaints, and I don't want to speak for all individuals, but the complaints that are associated with type 4 or 4C hair is primarily caused by oxidative stress. It is not necessarily genetic.